Alright, so we're going to spend some time talking about the classifications of corporations. Um, and so you may recall I referenced this in previous lectures. The corporation is formed under state law, right? Um, and unlike LLC, like LLC law, they're not uniform. There are some similarities, but there are also some pretty big differences, right? So what that really amounts to is that corporations are formed under the laws of a particular state. All right. Well, if I form a corporation under the laws of the state of Ohio, and I'm doing business in Ohio, then that corporation is classified as a domestic corporation. For instance, Kroger is an Ohio corporation, so Kroger stores operating in the state of Ohio are operating as a domestic corporation. All right. Foreign. Well, Kroger has locations in Kentucky and in actually many other states, but let's talk about Kentucky. So Kroger doing business in the state of Kentucky is doing business as a foreign corporation because Kroger is an Ohio corporation. So what does that mean? Well, it means they have to register with that Secretary of State. They have to make certain filings. I mean, it varies from state to state. But any operations Kroger has in the state of Kentucky are as a foreign corporation. All right? Alien corporations, right? And these aren't corporations that are, operated by, aliens and with, green skin and laser rays. It's not that. These are corporations formed in other countries. And I'll give you an example. Burger King was formed in the, I believe it was the late 70s, and for a very long while was it was headquartered in Miami. It was a Florida corporation. And recently, several years back, Burger King merged with a Canadian corporation, Tim Hortons. Perhaps you're familiar with it. They sell coffee and donuts and that type of stuff. As a result of the merger, and really, technically it was an acquisition, Tim Hortons acquired Burger King. And the headquarters of the company, I believe, which is called RBI, is in Canada, right? And so as a result, Burger King operations are now in the United States are now as an alien corporation because they're operated by a Canadian corporation. Now, of course, the reason to do this was to avoid the American corporate taxes, right? Which was successful. So that's an example of an alien corporation. All right. So there's some potentially confusing terminology here. So follow me kind of closely. Public corporation. A public corporation is different than a publicly traded corporation. All right. So keep that in mind. A public corporation is a corporation formed by a governmental entity. So it could be federal, state, or local government. All right, so corporations formed at the federal level, Amtrak is one, right? Corporation formed to offer reasonable cost rail transportation throughout the United States. All right. Another example of a public corporation would be the Federal Depository Insurance Commission, the FDIC. All right, which was formed post-Depression to give Americans the ability to, really motivation to trust in the American banking system, right? Because the banking system is central to our economy. And so there were runs on the banks. If you've studied the Depression, you're aware of this. And Congress formed the Federal Depository Insurance Commission for that reason, so that Americans would use the banking system. Another example is the United States Postal Service, right, which was formed by Congress as a public corporation as well. Private corporations, and these are formed for private profit, right? So these are your Walmarts and your Googles and your Microsofts and your Apple computers of the world, right? These exist to enrich their owners, their shareholders, right? Many of these, all of these I just named are private companies, but they are publicly traded. And all publicly traded means is that you don't have to pass any qualification test to invest in the company. All you need is a brokerage account and sufficient money to purchase stock. And you can purchase stock on open exchanges, New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, American Stock Exchange, etc. All right. Nonprofit corporations, and these are similar to public corporations. Except for there's a charitable focus. They don't typically issue stock, right? They're not formed by a governmental entity, but they are formed to serve a charitable purpose, right? And nonprofit is somewhat of a misnomer. They can generate a profit. They just cannot distribute it. So profits have to be retained and put back into operations, right? And when a nonprofit corporation shuts down or ceases to operate, typically its assets have to be liquidated and distributed to another nonprofit entity. Close corporations. So close corporations are private corporations designed to enrich individuals, but they're not publicly traded. You can't just go and buy stock. One example is SC Johnson Wax, right? If you've ever seen their commercials, you know at the end of their commercials, I think they have a few brands, Raid and Lysol and things like that. And at the end of their commercials, they'll say SC Johnson Wax, a family company. Well, a family company is synonymous with a close corporation. All it means is that you can't buy stock in that company. The stock is usually held in a particular bloodline. Right? All of the stock is owned by one particular family. All right? And S corporations. So we started with the premise that corporations are created under state law, and the exception to that is the S corporation. It is created under federal law. S corporations avoid the double taxation drawback that C corporations created under state law have. All right. Tax-like partnerships, so they have to file a Schedule K-1. There is a limitation on the number of partners, and commonly the S corporation is compared to the LLC. Existing S corporations continue to exist as such, but if you're forming a new business, there's very little reason to form as an S corp when you could elect to form as an LLC. Just because the LLC is much more flexible, the S corp requires that owners there's citizenship requirements. There's a limitation. I think it's 100 or 125 shareholders, where the LLC doesn't have any limitation on the number of members that you can have, and it offers the same taxation, and it also allows for members to be other entities in most states. So corporations can be members in an LLC, whereas you generally need a person of natural birth to be a member in an S corporation. All right. The professional corporation, or PC for short. So, certain professionals cannot, by virtue of their professional code or oath, cannot exist with limited liability. So they can't form as a normal corporation, right? Doctors, for instance, cannot limit their liability for their own negligence. So they form professional corporations. And in many ways, they function like limited liability partnerships. The doctors have limited liability for certain business negligence things, like slip and falls or things of that nature, and also limited liability for the acts of their peers, their fellow co-owners or co-shareholders, as it would be in a professional corporation. But the doctors are still going to have unlimited personal liability for their own medical malpractice or professional malpractice, because it's not limited to doctors. Dentists use this. In some states, accountants can use this as a form. But that's the professional corporation. Benefit corporations. So I referenced in the chartering document that corporations need a legal description of the business, and usually it's very generic, something like to operate business enterprise for a profit. Well, benefit corporations take a broader approach to their own existence, and they're formed from the ground up, and they're formed to make profit, but they also are formed to benefit the society that they exist in some manner, whatever is articulated in the chartering document that's filed with the Secretary of State. So what does that mean? Well, that means that if that corporation fails to do that benefit, it must legally go out of business and dissolve. All right. Some examples of this are Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, Tom's Shoes. These are companies that are formed from the ground up as benefit corporations, right? And so this is designed to circumvent or counteract the negative PR that many corporations have, that they will do anything to earn a dollar. If there's a cost that they can impose on society, they will if it adds to the corporate bottom line. And this is a counterculture movement the other way. Benefit corporations go hand in hand with certified B Corps, which I'll post a video on, so you'll have some information about that. Chances are you've probably seen the certified B Corp logo on certain products in the grocery store. You may or may not have noticed it or even known what it was, but they're part of the counterculture movement that corporations have a social responsibility to the societies that they exist within.